one of the most common threads in Discords and ttrpg forums. It says, "Help, I am planning a campaign." And within enclosed is a 10-page document of lore where the word BBEG is repeated multiple times with seemingly no reference to the players whatsoever. And it makes you wonder, what do people even mean when they say they're planning a campaign? Do they know what they mean? Welcome back, everybody. This is GDS. By the end of this video, you'll know what planning a campaign means, and using that knowledge, how to do so well, how to prepare for your game. But before we start, I want you to go to the blah blah below, that's the comments, and let me know, what do you mean when you say planning a campaign? This is a small channel. I don't get many comments. If you comment below, I'm going to see it, heart it, and probably respond, so let's get a conversation going. Usually, when people post about their campaign idea, it's, like we said, a massive lore document with BBEG repeated, with no reference to the players or the player characters, except sometimes, at the end, it says, "and the players need to stop it." Now, I think I understand why this happens. When people think of their new game that they want to run, similar to how they think about a new TV show that they want to watch or a movie, what they're sold on is the fantasy of the game, the fantasy of the thing, which means the tones, themes, epic moments, and ideas that are evoked when you engage with it. And then excited, what they do is write all these things down, which by itself is great to do. There's nothing bad about writing down things that you're inspired by. The tricky thing comes in where you want to turn this from a lore dump or a world building document or whatever into a game to run for your friends. There are two issues that can come up when you present that as prep for a campaign. One, there is no necessary relation of determination between any of the things you made. In other words, they're not necessarily causally related. It's just things that you were inspired by. The second thing is that these are the things that you were inspired by, that you write down with your own authorial voice. And the problem is that when you run a game for your friends, you're essentially running a story where their characters are the main characters and should have causal impact on the story. In other words, as the main characters, they drive the story forwards. And so how do we take this excitement that you have about your campaign idea and turn it into actually a campaign idea? That is, something that you can actually run for your players. And I think what we're orbiting here and where I want to arrive is first by defining what the hell is a campaign. I think it's fair to say that a campaign is a series of adventures that the PCs go through. And so when you're planning a campaign, what you mean is, or at least what you should mean, substituting that definition in, you are planning a series of adventures that you are going to run the PCs through. And so that's what a campaign is. A campaign is a series of adventures that come after one another in series. Now, if you're planning a coherent campaign where things make sense, you would hope that not only do the events or the adventures come after one another, but also that they're causally linked, in that when you tell the story of the campaign, instead of using the word "and then," for example, the players stole the crystal, and then a dragon attacked, and then somebody turned into a bugbear, you would use the word "therefore." In other words, things cause one another. And so when we are planning a campaign, this is exactly what we need to plan. We need to plan a series of adventures for the PCs, wonderful, and we need to plan their relation of determination. In other words, how are they causally linked? How do they go from one adventure to the other? Now here, when planning a campaign, I think there are two schools of thoughts, which have some similarities but also some differences, so listen closely. The first one is that you outline the entire thing and plan all the adventures and their connections from the very beginning before you even run a single session. The second is that you plan a first session and also plan the groundworks that would help you and make it easy for you to come up with whatever the next session is, and its connection to the last session. I think it's valuable to stop here for just a second, slow down, and recognize that, one, many people say planning a campaign, but they don't mean planning a series of adventures. I don't know what they mean. They mean something else, but clearly it's not that, because they're just writing a story. And the second thing is that even if you are talking about planning a series of adventures, you could still be meaning two different things. You could mean that you do everything in the very beginning, upfront all the work, and then run it, or that you plan the first session, lay out the groundworks, and then plan out each session consecutively. These are all different things that people mean by using the same words. I am planning a campaign. So watch out for that. Let's next analyze the two ways to plan a campaign. What is common amongst these methods? I think the first one is, like we talked about before, these campaigns are ultimately inspired by a fantasy. What do you think about this campaign is cool? What inspires you? What moments, what tones, what ideas, what media makes you go, oh my god, this would be so cool, I can't wait to show this to my friends. And then the second thing that's common is that you want to be able to take those fantasies, which are abstract in nature, and turn them into concrete things. For example, into goals for your campaign. Given this particular fantasy, given this particular tone, what goals do I have for my campaign? What kind of things do I want it to accomplish? For example, if I just watched a whole Western marathon and I am getting excited about the idea of Westerns, one of the goals for my campaign might be that the world is going to be morally ambiguous. Those are two commonalities between the two methods of planning a campaign. Now, what are the differences? And there are plenty of differences. Depending on what you want, they would make you pick one or the other. So let's get into it. Let's call method 1, where you plan out everything in the beginning, the outlining method, and method 2, where you basically plan the first session, lay out the groundworks, and then plan each session as it comes, the groundworks method. Both methods will start with a fantasy, what's cool about this, distill it into goals, what do I want to accomplish, and where they differ is the mechanics, as in, well, how do we actually do this? Let's plan the actual sessions. In the outlining method, you basically write an entire narrative arc or story where the PCs are the main characters of the adventure. So whatever you write, there could be many different kinds of stories. Make sure that the PCs are the main characters of the story, or at the very least, that the story has a lot to do with the main characters. I want to stress this because that's not usually what you see. When people say they're planning a campaign, you usually see a massive lore dump, and maybe some even ideas for a session with the words BBEG repeated multiple times, but the player characters are not often mentioned. Now, that doesn't mean they're not important for the story, but it gives you an indication, and I bet if you read these, you will also come to the conclusion that the PCs are not particularly important for the story this person is planning. So read the campaign that you are planning, and be honest. If you find yourself asking, what the hell does this have to do with the PCs? Then it doesn't mean to scrap everything, but it means you have a strong fantasy that you're excited by. That's why you wrote this campaign idea. All you need to do is to find a way to evoke these feelings through a story that is relevant for the PCs. If, on the other hand, you say, this is what happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and the PCs need to stop it, look how the content you made has almost nothing to do with the adventure that you're going to run. By which I mean, you're running an adventure for your friends who are playing the PCs. So your ideas and the story you're making should have something to do with the PCs. More than that, the PCs should be the main characters. So when you're planning a campaign, make sure you can always answer the question, what are the player characters doing at this point? What's the verb that they are doing? And why? And very importantly, how do their actions affect the cause and effect between one session and the other? As the main characters, they should be the primary drivers for cause and effect. Now, I say sessions, but I think it's important to say you don't have to start with concrete sessions. You can outline general ideas and drill down as you go. The most important thing I'm trying to stress, and I think I've said this enough, so I'll get off my soapbox, is make sure it's all relevant for the player characters. That is the general strategy I think it's good to take when you're doing the outlining method. Now, let's think about the groundworks method, because it's evidently quite different. You're doing a similar thing, but instead of outlining an entire story where the PCs are the main characters, you do only two things, really. One, you plan a first session, and two, you lay out groundworks that will make it easy for you to plan the next session. When you do these two things, I have basically one tip, which is to leave space. You are going to be planning this game session by session. So you have to leave space for future you or for your friends to surprise you. And what this means concretely is, as you plan the groundworks and the first session, plan 1, what you absolutely need for those things, and 2, what inspires you. What makes you go, oh, this is awesome, I want to share this with my friends. That's what people get excited about. That's what you got excited about. And that excitement will infect your friends. They will feel it when you design something that you truly love, and feel it when you don't. So, design what you absolutely need, and what you're inspired by, and leave space for the rest. And just doing those things, planning the first session, and laying out the groundworks in the way I just described, is planning a campaign. That is literally it. For this method, the groundworks method, that is planning a campaign. That's all you need to do. That's what these two methods are. Two different things that people can mean when they say they're planning a campaign. I hope that by actually talking about these concretely and separating the ideas, it helps you have a better idea of what it is you're doing when you say, I'm planning a campaign. And if you're doing so right now, if you're doing an outline or a groundworks, I hope the tips can help you do it better. Next, if you're still not sure which one you want to use, I want to discuss some pros and cons of each method. First, the outline method. Pros. 1, you outline everything from the very beginning, which is a lot of work, but it does mean that you can outline everything from the very beginning. You can upfront the work before you even have the first session. This means that while you're not playing and you have time, you can do all the work that you need to do, and when you're busy and not have time and are running, you can just run it without having to worry about anything else. The second pro is that because you're planning the entire story up front, and don't get me wrong, it could have several forks in the way where the destination of the players differs, but more or less you are outlining the entire story, which means, and I'm not saying this in a bad way, it is a railroad. It's a railroad. The campaign is on rails. You know where the destination is and everything in between because you outlined everything from the very beginning. This is not necessarily a bad thing because it simplifies your job as a GM. You don't have to worry about player determination. What if the players want to open a basketball court? That's not the type of game we're running. Of course, you need to communicate what type of campaign you're running for your players, but once you do, it makes it a lot easier. Now to the cons of outlining. Like we just said, it is essentially a railroad, and that can be a bad thing for players who like self-determination, for whom that's a very important thing when playing tabletop games. So just make sure you align with your players. Hey, this is what I'm going to run. For example, when you run a module for your game, a pre-written module, it's very clear to everyone it's a railroad, and they're fine with it because they just want to experience a module because they think the idea is cool. So just communicate there's nothing necessarily bad about a railroad. People love roller coasters. The second con is that, like we just said, all the work is put up front before you even start the first session. So it's a lot of work up front, which is a pro, like we said, but also a con. The third con is that because you do all this prep before even starting your first session, and nobody knows how long the campaign is going to last, you might do some work that's ultimately not used. That's just a fact, because nobody knows and nobody can predict the future. And the fourth con is that you outline and make the story that you're excited by now. But as creative people, and that includes you if you're a GM, what you're inspired by changes. So if you outline a 20-week-long campaign, are you still inspired by the same things that you were 20 weeks before? Those are some cons. And some pros for the outlining method. Let's move on to the groundworks method. What are the pros? One of the pros is that, unlike the other method, this one allows for self-determination of the players. Because you plan each session right after the last one, whatever the players do, you have time to react to and plan for. This means that players for whom self-determination is very important will probably prefer to play a campaign where you use this method to prep. The second pro is that for this method, the prep is literally minimal. What I mean by that is that you literally just plan the next session and whatever groundworks you're inspired to make to help you plan the next sessions. You're planning the minimum amount that you need to run for your friends. This is a big bonus for people who are busy, which from what I understand is most people. The third pro is that you can change parts of the game depending on what you're inspired by this week. Remember that in the outline method, you might not be inspired to plan session 17 before you even ran anything. But in this method, after you had just run session 16, you might be very inspired to run session 17 and have lots of ideas. You have a lot of context from all your past sessions and a lot of time and space to marinate on ideas and get excited. Now, some cons for the outline method. The first obvious one is that because you don't plan everything up front and every week you plan the next session, or, whatever your schedule is, it means you're constantly doing work before every session. For people who have time, that's not necessarily a problem, but your timeline might not be so regular. Maybe for you, it's much better to upfront the work. The second con is that because you don't plan everything in the beginning, it's a little more loosey-goosey when it comes to the formation of a narrative. Now, some people might say, I don't care about a narrative, I don't care about a story, I just like to roll dice and kill monsters with, the dice. To you, I say that every game you play and every thing you do in the game retroactively becomes a story when you look back at it. So you are creating a story and a narrative whether you want to or not. The question is, are you being careful about it? Are you being deliberate? And unfortunately, with this particular method, it's harder, not impossible, of course, but harder to be deliberate about making a narrative arc and a satisfying story with a beginning, middle, and end. That's everything to say I have before the sun goes out, and also on this particular topic. To sum up, in this video, I showed that people mean very different things when they say they're planning a campaign and copy-paste their lore dump. And I showed how to do different methods for planning campaigns, how to do both of them at a high level, and the pros and cons. I hope this video helps you refine your campaign idea, or if you're not planning a campaign yet, maybe it makes you want to plan one. I hope it also helps you see those posts and realize what kind of feedback would be useful for this person. Maybe they say they're planning a campaign, but they actually mean something very different than what you mean. You would need to change the way you give feedback in accordance with that. That's everything I have to say. If you like this video, make sure to slam the like button. Let's go for an odd number of times. Let's go for 117. If you want to see more, please subscribe. And I know it helps a lot if you share this video, so please share. We have a Discord. It's going to be in the nonsense below. We talk about all the same things we talk here. It's kind of astonishing. It's a small community, but if you post, you'll probably get a response day of. It's active as people use it. Or what I'm trying to say is, if you post something, people will respond and be very helpful. And I've been very proud of that. That's everything I got. On the screen now, I'm going to have some relevant videos that you might like. One of them is going to be about open world building. How do you start an open world game? That would obviously be more of a Groundworks method. And the second one is, how do you create narrative without railroading? Which is one of the problems that I raised in this video. That's pretty much it. I'm losing my voice! And with that, I'm going to give you some time to click off the video. Maybe click on one of the videos that are on the screen, or skip the ad that's about to come. 3, 2, 1. That's it. I'll see you later.